Hello and good evening. You're watching Startup Central on ET Now, the first and only daily show in India dedicated to startups and entrepreneurship. I'm Ruchi Bhatia. Straight up, let's get you an ET Now exclusive. And even as the government is putting final touches to the e-commerce policy, the Consumer Affairs Ministry has now proposed guidelines that are looking to put consumers first. The ministry has proposed additions that are largely in line with the Consumer Protection Bill that the Parliament is yet to give a go-ahead to. Let me take it across to my colleague Parisha Tyagi, who is joining in with exclusive details. And thereafter, we will be getting a special guest on the show to decode what putting consumer first really means as far as the new e-commerce policy is concerned. But first up, let's take it across to Parisha. Parisha, what are you picking up and what does it really mean for consumers?
When we talk of e-commerce policy, there have been all sorts of concerns that have been raised, but largely they have been regarding the future of companies and that the new policy will put a bar on their functioning and will hurt their business. But the Consumer Affairs Ministry, as you said, has come out with guidelines on how to protect consumers, because largely the e-commerce business or these online selling platforms run on the basis of credibility. There's no strict norms or strict punishment measures defined as of now to help consumers in case of a fraud or substandard services. So the Consumer Affairs Ministry has proposed to define clear laws, clear norms, and they have also called for more information for consumers when they are making purchases. They've said that consumers should know who they are buying from. In case of a third-party sellers, we have seen that there are many instances when the platform selling is not accountable for a product. They are sourcing it from the outside, from a third-party seller. So in that case, Consumer Affairs Ministry is saying that the buyer should know who he is buying from, and in case of a problem, who will be accountable for after services, for returns. The Consumer Affairs Ministry has also asked for stricter norms on security of the data of consumers, like when we make online payments, whether our data is encrypted or not, whether our bank details are secure or not, in fact whether our phone number is being shared with others. So Consumer Affairs Ministry has asked for stricter norms on that. They've also asked for defined rules and regulations about delivery refunds. So that's what is on cards.
Okay, what does it really mean for consumers? Let's get an entrepreneur's take on the new e-commerce draft policy that is in the works and what the Consumer Affairs Ministry is proposing. Joining us on the phone line is Vaitheeswaran, the author of Failing to Succeed. Many thanks for joining us and speaking to us at ET Now. Let me first begin by asking you, there is a new e-commerce draft policy that is in the works, and now we understand that the Consumer Affairs Ministry also seems to be stepping in. They want to put consumers first. How should one really look at it? And while it is good news for consumers, how should entrepreneurs or e-commerce companies are likely to take this?
Yeah, so I think over the last month or so, when the first draft came, and since then some changes have been offered, and many ministries are now coming in and jumping in with their own views. From the time the draft policy has come out, my view on this has been actually a bit different. I believe e-commerce has always been and will continue to remain another retail channel. I'm not even sure whether I think the government is really trying to complicate it by having a policy that has so many things. Many of the suggestions seem to be impractical to me. So, let me take one, which is, for example, protecting the consumer, which is a new thing that has come. Multiple ministries are trying to do this. How do we protect the consumer? What are the steps we can take to keep their best interest in hand? Who's liable? The fact of the matter is, if you treat e-commerce as another retail channel, which means it's just another shop, it is no different from transacting when you go and buy stuff at a physical store, except that you don't have a physical transaction across the counter. But the liability rules are remaining the same. If you go into a retail store and buy something and the product turns out to be defective, you go back to the store where you bought from. The fact that the store would have sourced it from a third party and bought it is irrelevant to the consumer. So I think the same rules must apply as far as e-commerce is concerned. They must make it very simple that always the platform has to be liable. Nobody else can be liable. If it is a marketplace and the third-party seller is selling, well, that's really for the platform to deal with it. There's no way, there's no way you're going to have a customer trying to decode who's shipping it, who's the liability. All of that, I think, is one fact. There are other issues that they've also mentioned, which also sounds to be quite impractical to me. So, for example, there's a rule that says that deep discounts are going to be removed, and they're going to take steps to make sure that the platforms do not deep discount. I don't even know how the government is planning to do
right.
this. How do you do this? How do you go measure price?
In fact, absolutely, Mr. Vaitheeswaran, let me ask you another important question that you've touched upon, and then help us understand on that. You said that in this, the government is unnecessarily trying to complicate the entire matter. It should be treated as just other retail platform. But the thing is that, once you're shopping on an online platform, you're providing them a lot of your important, private data as well. How should the government really look at that, especially from the point of view of data privacy, data protection? Don't you think certain rules, certain guidelines should be put in place as that are rightly being suggested by the Consumers Affairs Ministry here?
So, when you transact on an e-commerce platform, there are really three different types of data that is getting shared by consumers. At a first level, there is data relating to payment, which is when I'm sharing my credit card or debit card. I think the fact of the matter is, despite all the stuff that keeps going around, the fact of the matter is that this is highly encrypted. It's almost impossible for anybody to actually get access to your credit card details if you're sharing it online on an encrypted platform system. Sites like Amazon and all are absolutely safe. So that's one level. So I don't think when you share payment data, encryption is a challenge. The second important type of data that gets shared is the minimum information that we need to share with an e-commerce site for them to deliver the product, which is essentially name, address, phone number, email ID, so that they keep you informed about the product and they deliver. I think the challenge is data privacy really steps in the third level, which over the last several years, what has happened is, and it's not just restricted to e-commerce companies, I think any company that is strong in digital, so it could be an app like, say, Uber, not just an Amazon type of company. What they've done is they've taken the minimum level, they've gone to third level. Now they're able to track customers' movements, locations, how exactly they are behaving. A lot of these customers' movements are being tracked even when they're not transacting on the app, because at the back end that app is live and taking the data and sharing it. That's the one that we need to be careful about. I think where we need to be careful about is not, we shouldn't throw the baby out along with the bath water. The fact of the matter is payment details are safe. The fact of the matter is you need to give the e-commerce site minimum data. We need to give them the address and the phone number for us to get the stuff back. Right. We need to worry about the third level where they're actually mining our location data.
So let me, I get your point on that, but, sir, help us understand, as someone who's built India's first e-commerce company, if you can quickly tell us, what are the big concerns? How should they be addressed to create a consensus between trader bodies, e-commerce players, as well as provide a level playing field, a decent field for consumers as well, putting their interests first?
I think one of the reasons why the trader bodies have got very I guess they're quite upset and annoyed with the way, especially the Walmart Flipkart deal has happened, is this is not a new development. I mean, and I go back to my earlier point. I think as long as, if you go 10 years back, when we started e-commerce in 1999, there was no e-commerce platform policy as such because it is so new. And therefore, we simply followed all the policies that were relevant for retail. Over the last few years, what has happened is the government has started separating it, and that's when the whole trader bodies have got very worried. If you look at the way India actually has a very strange policy as far as FDI and retail is concerned. I mean, as a nation, we are all for getting FDI into defense manufacturing, but we do not allow FDI into retail by saying that it is a very security issue, which actually sounds very strange, because this should be far more easier to do it than, say, defense manufacturing, but we have never allowed it. The reason is FDI and retail in India has always been about politics and never about economics. Essentially, they should simply throw up an FDI into retail, into e-commerce, and leave it and treat it as a simple industry and close it. But by keeping it separately, by saying there's a separate rule, there's a 49%, there's a 51%. Some years back they said physical retailers, okay, we'll allow you this, but you're
the government is causing more confusion then. Absolutely, absolutely. Very rightly said, Mr. Vaitheeswaran. Many thanks for taking your time out, speaking to us at ET now, and helping us understand the perspective from the e-commerce players, the trader bodies as well, and you know, what should be done now, the kind of rules and regulations that the government should be working with. All right, let's move on. And looks like the tussle between the government of India as well as WhatsApp is only getting murkier. In fact, reports suggesting that even though the government is pulling up WhatsApp to not doing enough to curb the menace of fake news, now reports suggest that WhatsApp seems to believe that the government is deliberately trying to create a distorted playing field. They're delaying the payments license for WhatsApp. In fact, sources suggest that the IT ministry has written to RBI, the National Payments Commission, as well, raising questions about WhatsApp's data sharing practices. The government insists that the messaging services owned by Facebook must comply with localization norms before getting a payments bank license. On its part, WhatsApp is arguing that tracing the original sender of the message will be an infringement of freedom of speech and expression. It also claims that WhatsApp messages are end-to-end encrypted and it is technically impossible to track users. All right, we take a short break here. Coming up on the other side, UIDAI is going to come up with the face authentication technique of theirs from September 15th. We tell you all about that on the other side. Welcome back. You're watching Startup Central with me, Ruchi Bhatia. If you're planning for a new SIM card from September 15th, be prepared to undergo a facial recognition. Well, yes, that is the new feature that the UIDAI has now launched. They've mandated a facial recognition for all Aadhaar authentication. The move is going to be extended to all other services as well in a phased manner. The UIDAI has instructed all telecom operators to ensure that they should start implementing a two-layer verification process, the facial recognition as well as the iris and fingerprinting scans. With effect from 15th of September, all telecom operators will have to perform at least 10% of the total monthly authentication using face authentication, failing which they will be fined. However, on the other side, it needs to be noted that this is coming in at a time when the Supreme Court is yet to give their final verdict on data privacy with respect to Aadhaar and what really happens to that data. All right, and of course, as the last thing on the show, let's get you all the funding action this week. And like always, we have data from Venture Intelligence to decode the big trends. This week, we saw about $54 million worth of deals, 9 deals being closed. That's almost the same as that we saw in the previous month. You can see major investments on the screen, but the big deal was closed by the self-driver car rental company Rev, which raised about $14 million from Hyundai and others, and furniture renting platform for Lenco also closed a $9 million in Series C from its existing investors. To discuss what really stands out this time around, Vaitheeswaran M from Venture Intelligence is joining in. Vaitheeswaran, thanks for taking your time out, speaking to us at ET now. On the face of it, it seems like a consistent week with 9 deals. But we have seen how the first 2 weeks of August, there were big deal wins. Overall, we have seen somewhat of a healthy trend. What's your own assessment?
August did start off very strongly. We had very large investments in Ola, ShopX, and that set the tempo for the month. And both the current and past weeks have seen over 9 investments. So August is likely to close with more than 40 investments worth $500 million. So that's a pretty strong month there. Apart from exits from Live.ai and as well as Walnut, this month has also seen close to 7 venture capital exits. So it's been a pretty good week for investors and startups.
Absolutely. Let me ask you another important bit. The fact that auto companies, their investments in startups, that is something that we've seen picking up this time around. Hyundai has backed Rev. Ford and TVS have also been active in this space. Is it sort of a new trend that you're witnessing in this space now, with the auto companies, the bigger ones especially, looking at these auto-based startups?
2018 has been very positive for strategic investments in India, and the auto component sector being no different. Apart from Hyundai, right, we had Ford, which invested in a Zoom car. We also had Toyota, which backed automobile marketplace Droom. So not just foreign players, we're also talking about domestic players. Mahindra is very active and has backed Zoom car. They backed a US company called Scoot Motors. They've also backed the Porter, so they are very active. You also had in the automobile, two-wheeler space, Hero MotoCorp has backed Ather Energy, TVS Group has backed Ultraviolet. So this industry is a very global one, and the industry is, they know that the future of mobility is moving towards more clean, shared, and more smart. So given the long gestation periods, automobile players making very early moves into this sector is positive for them.
Let me ask you another important issue. It's interesting to know that 4 of the 9 deals have been backed by strategic investors. That's a trend that we've noticed for quite some time. What's really driving the interest here?
Like I said, 2018 is that has been a defining factor. So if you look at just this week, apart from Hyundai, right, Colgate-Palmolive made its first investment in an Indian FMCG startup, which is Bombay Shaving Company. The problems of coming late to an industry has been the exorbitant prices that you have to pay to acquire startups. You only need to ask Unilever, which acquired the Dollar Shaving Club company for almost $1 billion. So coming in early, they're able to synergize innovation and distribution with startups. But having said that, Colgate has been a little bit late to the market. There has been a head start for domestic FMCG players like Dabur. You're talking about Imami Group. You're talking about Marico. You're talking about Wipro Consumer. They all have a head start in backing startups in the FMCG space.
All right. With that, I think it's a time to wrap up this show. Many thanks for taking your time out and speaking to us. And as we've been telling you, about $54 million worth of deals, 9 of them we've seen getting closed in this week itself. All right, with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Startup Central. We will, of course, come back with more news and updates on the other side.